One option is, and the Israeli chief of staff, a man whom I trust very much and respect, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, he said today he was in the Gaza division, and the purpose of his visit there was basically to signal to Israelis, but also to Gazans and to Americans. And his message was, we are preparing to complete the task in military ways.
Well, who is the go-to man that we have been listening since October 7th, since the war broke out? If you recall, from the day the war broke out, Israel's spokesperson was Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He held our hands through the war. He was our eyes and ears in Gaza as the war was happening and reporting truthfully and honestly. And we learned to rely and trust his ability to share with us with what's going on the ground. Well, let's listen to this interview with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus about the current situation with the Palestinian statehood once again, the pressures upon Israel to recognize a Palestinian statehood. Let's watch it together and we'll discuss it afterwards. Kindly subscribe to our channel so a little bit of light will push away a lot of darkness.
You are my go-to man when anything big is happening, not just in the Middle East, to do with Israel, in the US as well. I need to talk to you regarding this escalation, this development in the 20-point peace plan regarding a Palestinian state. Suddenly there's a new entity that is pushing for, promoting and backing this that we haven't really seen before, and it's a pretty big entity in that.
Yeah, what we're seeing is really different, and it's way much more than what Israel bargained for. Now there's, in very clear words in the draft proposal that the U.S. is bringing to the Security Council, in very clear words, saying that eventually this deal will lead to Palestinian statehood, and it almost writes it, not exactly in these words, but you can understand that this is the objective. This is what the deal is made to do. Peace, de-radicalize Gaza, get rid of Hamas, but eventually all roads lead to Rome, and Rome in this case is Palestinian statehood. So it's very worrying. I think many Israelis, left, right, and center, are asking themselves, is this what we bargained for? Is this what 2 years of fighting, is this the result? This isn't what the initial 20-point plan stipulated. Yes, there was vague mention of Palestinian statehood, but it wasn't as blatant as this one is. And for many Israelis, again, without any political affiliation, to have that logical connection between the atrocities that Hamas did on October 7th and then a political deal brokered by the US, by a president who undoubtedly has a very strong pro-Israeli track record, but to have that connection and to have October 7 Palestinian statehood, that is not a good look. And I think many Israelis at this current stage are very confused and frankly quite worried.
Would you say that the wool has been pulled over the eyes of people like Netanyahu and those involved in this, or would they have to have known that this was coming? And yes, the language was looser and it was softer in the actual agreement. It was palatable enough for people in Israel, even if they didn't like every element of it. This, I don't think, would have been. So is this an intentional move amongst all, that this was the only way to get it over the line? Or do you think that Bibi and others involved weren't aware that this was coming in this way?
Yeah, knowing the two Israelis who were key personnel here on the ground, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and up until a week and a half ago, Minister Dermer, formerly Ambassador Dermer, these are not naive people. These are very seasoned political operators, and I doubt that any type of wool was pulled over their eyes, and I doubt that something happened that they were not fully aware of and that they are now surprised. And I think the connection, you can begin to perhaps connect the different dots here, because when the deal was brought before the Israeli government to be signed, You remember that the envoys Witkoff and Kushner were sent by the president to be present in an internal Israeli government meeting, and they basically sat there and sang the praises of the prime minister and what a tough negotiator he was, allegedly, according to the team, and explained to Israeli ministers why this was such a great deal. Now, here's where it gets a bit odd and a bit suspicious, because the deal that they presented, those original 20 points, I said so, I believe, on your show as well, was indeed a good deal for Israel. Great for Gazans, gets rid of Hamas, a pathway to a much more prosperous future, de-radicalizes it, and it meets most of Israeli demands for security and a sustainable path for coexistence without the presence of extremists. But it was very, very vague when it came to anything about Palestinian statehood, and therefore Israeli ministers were probably they felt confident enough to actually go ahead and vote for it. What we have today is a different situation, and I think it's cause for concern in Israel. But I think we have to zoom out for a second and take a good hard look at the various real options here available on the table. One option is, and the Israeli Chief of Staff, a man whom I trust very much and respect, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, he said today he was in the Gaza division, and the purpose of his visit there was basically to signal to Israelis, but also to Gazans and to Americans. And his message was, we are preparing to complete the task in military ways. So if this doesn't go forward the way that the world and the US and Israel wants, peacefully and by agreement, then the other option is very much on the table. If we will need to...
task, Jonathan, that task is to completely eradicate Hamas?
It is to dismantle Hamas the good old-fashioned way that you defeat an enemy by killing them and forcing them to surrender and leaving them with no options but to come out with the white flag. Just like the Allies did in the Second World War, good old-fashioned fighting that ends with one side defeated, one side victorious, and with no ambiguity in the middle as to who is going to chart the path forward. That's usually how wars are supposed to end, regardless of who starts it. But that option is still on the table. A second option is basically Trump's plan, which has regional buy-in, but the bad part of it is that it seems as if the roads are all leading to Palestinian statehood. That, I think, is a strategic threat to Israel and something that a very large part of the Israeli electorate, left, right, and center, will not agree to. And the third option, which probably is worse or at least equally bad, is the Muslim Brotherhood, represented on the ground by money from Qatar and troops and political muscle from Turkey. And so none of these three options are really good. None of them are, what we would hope. We would hope that the second option, an international deal, wouldn't tether itself immediately and, feel compelled to push Palestinian statehood forward.
That's the bizarre thing, Jonathan, and sorry to interrupt you there, but why the immediacy here? Why can't, and I understand from some quarters why, but even from the US's perspective, why are they jumping on board something that doesn't feel quite right? I understand why the Arab states are, but why so soon? Why don't we watch and wait and see and give them a chance and then reward rather than reward a massacre?
Because it's never really been about Palestinian statehood, has it? I mean, the Palestinians, when you zoom out historical perspective here, the Palestinians are a result of the failure of Arab countries to defeat Israel on the battlefield, to defeat Israel diplomatically, and they are the last tool left in a dwindling toolbox that Arab countries and a few hostile European countries have against the very existence of the Jewish state. It is far less than what they hoped for in 48 and 67 and 73, but that is what they have left. Israel has grown strong and prosperous, much to the dismay and frustration of our enemies. But at the end of the day, Palestinian statehood is now what former enemies, some of them currently with peace deals with Israel, see as their way to inflict damage on Israel. And I say this, and it will sound cynical perhaps to people who aren't from the region, and maybe they will question my humanitarian credentials here, but I'll say this. Anybody that supports UNRWA, anybody that supports keeping millions of people in a permanent and hereditary situation of victimhood and refugee status is not a friend of that people. And Arab countries have been keeping this fictional situation alive for generations now, not because they care about the plight or the future of the Palestinian people, but because they want something to hit Israel with.
Yeah.
So here, what we're seeing is Turkey and Qatar, and I think this is the answer to your question of why. Turkey and Qatar, two important countries, bridesmaids of this deal, with very strong ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, very strong ties to Hamas. They have probably, in my assessment, conditioned their support. And what they're saying is that unless the issue of Palestinian statehood is front-loaded and given a lot of real estate in this deal, we're not going to support it. And look, the Russians are bringing another proposal to vote on. We may vote on that instead, and maybe that's a better deal going forward. And I'll add another part into the equation here of advanced weapons. And I think we have to address that as well, because there are two potential enemies, one closer than the other, in the region that are seeking strategic weapons from the US, specifically the F-35 fifth generation aircraft. Turkey, very close, reportedly, and so is Saudi Arabia. And President Trump is dealing with that as a commodity. And we know that both countries want that very much. And we also understand that that would be a significant blow to a long-standing American policy that has been across political divides, which is something referred to as the qualitative military edge that Israel has in the region, thanks to priority provided with American weapons. And if two countries in the region, one very hostile, one potentially hostile, get F-35 weapons, that will really destabilize and undermine that QME. And that's another difficult thing that Israelis are kind of waking up to now as this deal advances.
The enormity of this, I think, and it's only just broken the Palestinian statehood element, but the enormity of what you point to now regarding these deals with very elite weaponry from the US to nations who wish Israel harm, some of them very openly, I think it's being lost on people. This feels like a tinderbox here. I can't see Israelis accepting this, but what happens if they don't? What happens if they don't? What happens to the relationship with the US? Can Netanyahu survive accepting this as part of this peace deal, a Palestinian statehood?
Yeah, I think Netanyahu's survival is less important. What is more important is the future of the state of Israel. And, I have to be blunt and say that currently, with how this war was brought to a ceasefire, with Israel's diplomatic standing and the lack of international credit under Prime Minister Netanyahu's actions as a prime minister, Israel found itself with very few venues and flexibility to operate.
Yeah.
And I say that with a lot of sadness. I'm definitely not happy. I think that the mismatch here between, on one hand, significant, quite extraordinary military achievements against our enemies, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad in Iraq, and against the Houthis to a lesser extent, but lots of significant military achievements. But then on the political, diplomatic level, an acute shortage of legitimacy and leeway to operate. And it was at this juncture that President Trump came in and probably told Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is the deal. And this is the only option that there is, because you, Prime Minister of Israel, don't have many other options. And that is not where I would want us to be in. And I think that this deal, which currently looks to be a railroad towards Palestinian statehood, is not the desired outcome that we were looking for. And I think that we're looking at strategic damage and a threat to the future of the state of Israel, with a state that is governed by terrorists, where there's no clear, really, indications of any reform that the Palestinian Authority has gone through or is planning to go through, and specifically not its main let's say, perspective towards Israel, which is that they still have not recognized our right to exist, and they still haven't said, yes, we're willing to end the conflict.
Yeah.
This would be, if a Palestinian state is founded today under the current leadership of Mahmoud Abbas and the people surrounding him, with the current situation in Gaza, if those two entities are joined into one state, that would be a serious, grave, an urgent threat to the state of Israel, something that would be unacceptable. And that is
And
where
that's
things are leading.
and that's exactly what I'm trying to understand is what happens next if the US and Saudi and Qatar and all the, Indonesia's on board there push this and Israel are in a position where they don't have any other option other to accept, but they can't accept. What happens? What happens next? I mean, Trump's going to get what happens? If Trump wants this, but Israel say, we can't accept this, we can't accept a Palestinian state run by a pay-for-slay terrorist on our doorstep that's going to repeat the atrocities of October 7. We have a duty to protect our people. What happens? I'm trying to see a way that would be acceptable to Trump, but also to Israel here, or is there not? Like, what happens next?
Yeah, maybe what a political master as Prime Minister Netanyahu is counting on is the other side, for the other side to drop the ball and again do things that are, completely things that you just cannot accept, unacceptable,
Gotcha.
and for that to derail the deal. Maybe.
Gotcha.
Maybe he's so sure that Hamas will refuse to disarm of their weapons, so the deal won't follow through, and we're still stage one out of many, because we still haven't gotten all of the bodies of the murdered Israeli hostages back. There are 3 left, 2 Israelis and 1 foreign. Sorry, no, 3 Israeli bodies left to be returned, and Hamas hasn't even made 1 inch of progress towards disarming.
Yeah.
So maybe
Okay.
the gamble here is that, okay, we're willing to go ahead with the 20-point deal, but of course Hamas is refusing, and hence it's not going to
Gotcha.
happen. If it
Yeah.
is, that is a very, very risky gamble.
What is the old saying that we can't expect to repeat the same thing and expect a different results? I think that's quoting from Albert Einstein. But here, it's like trying to redo what we have tried so many times, and we're going to expect different results. We're dealing with a whole different scenario. The world is very different post October 7. From October 8 and on, the world has learned, although they seem to have put a lot of blinders on themselves, to realize that there is no partner in peace. There is no interest in peace. And how can we even fathom for a moment to reward October 7 with Palestinian statehood? Why now are they going to accept statehood while they turned it down 5 times since 1948? I've heard another commentator who counted like 13 times. So many opportunities were given for the Palestinians to have a statehood, but they turned it down. Most famously, if you listen to Mr. former President Bill Clinton, one of his greatest regrets was that he was promised by Yasser Arafat that there is going to be a peace deal, and then Yasser Arafat backed down. That was one of his regrets from his presidency. And this has happened time again and again and again and again. It is quite obvious that the Palestinians are not interested in a dual statehood. They are interested in one state. They want Israel and the Jewish people to no longer exist. On what foundation, on what basis? Many people have been fooled into believing that the Palestinian is an actual group of people. You may have heard it, you may have not heard it before. There are no Palestinian people. It's an invention. They are Jordanians. The group of people who are in Gaza right now, who call themselves Palestinians or in the West Bank, they all came from Jordan. They are Jordanians. They have a country, they have a state. What do they need a second state? What do they need a second place? You are Jordanians. Go back to Jordan, and this is where your homeland is. Israel does not belong to you. It never belonged to you. You never owned it. You were never living there. Israel was owned 3,000 years ago by the Jewish people. We can prove to you, both through documents and through agriculture diggings, the earth talks for itself. And the most pervasive and the most important document is our title to the property. The title is the Bible. The Bible, which is the oldest document and the most popular book to be sold. Even today, they say the Bible is the most sold book of all time. Well, the Bible is our title to the land of Israel. In the Bible, it is very clear from God Almighty, where God told Abraham, who grew up in a household of idol worshippers, who was the first one to introduce monotheism to the world, the first one to introduce the world to one God, to the creator of all beings. God revealed himself to Abraham, as recorded in the book of Genesis, and says, I will show you where to go. Leave your family, leave your birthplace, leave where you came from, and I'm going to show you where to go. And he sent him to Israel. And he told him, I am going to give you this land for you and for all the generations to come. This is Israel, and this is where Israel belongs to. In 2005, 20 years ago, on August 15, Israel did a terrible thing. Only now did it discover. It traded land for peace. Then Prime Minister Mr. Ariel Sharon felt that if we give away a part of Israel to the Palestinians, there'll be peace. So he gave an order that 10,000 Israelis should evacuate, should be expelled, the expulsion of Gaza. It was horrible to think that once again a large group of Jews will be displaced. And this is from their own homes, from their own neighborhoods, from their own workplaces. There was not one Jew left in Gaza on August 15, 2005. Gaza became, as they say, Judenrein, what Hitler wanted in Europe. There was not one Jew left in Gaza or one Jew allowed to ever come into Gaza. Not only that, they even had to uproot the cemeteries. They had to exhume the bodies because they couldn't leave the bodies behind because they knew what they would do to them. They left them beautiful neighborhoods, beautiful companies, factories, and great greenhouse industry. They had every opportunity to turn it into a thriving country, a thriving state. They could have had their statehood. They could have taken the billions of dollars that were given to them and invested it in an infrastructure that would feed the 2 million that are there, give them an education, give them the medical needs, create an industry where they can work and be productive citizens. They could have built resorts and airport. They could have created high-rise buildings and created it into a beautiful, like a French Riviera. They had all the opportunity to do it, but they did not. They chose not to because that's not what they're interested in. And it's not what the Arab world is interested in, is giving Palestinian statehood. they're using the Palestinian cause to try to annihilate Israel and the Jewish people from the Middle East, because we are in the way of letting the Arab Caliphate take over the world. And that is why America and the West needs to thank Israel for fighting its war and preventing the extreme jihadists, the death cult, from spreading throughout the world. So I certainly hope that after listening to Mr. Jonathan Conricus, you have a little more clarity of what's happening. It is definitely not ideal. It's not what we were hoping for. And, as he mentioned, perhaps it will fall away just like all the other deals fell away. And we'll be able to continue on securing our borders. As Golda Meir once said, when they begin loving their children to be alive than dead, they begin loving life more than death, then there'll be peace in the Middle East. Israel wants peace. Israel just wants to secure its borders and live and let us do our thing. What is our thing? In being a light unto the nations, in being able to provide the world advances in all areas of life to help humanity. Israel does not say, what can the world do for it, but rather, what can Israel do for humanity? Let Israel continue to accomplish what it has done. It has proven itself in the last 77 years, with all its inventions and innovations, how well they have established themselves from the darkness of the Holocaust. They came to Israel in 1948 not as victims, but they came as giants. They came as innovators who rolled up their sleeves and did not cry for a victim, but rather saying, we're going to be a pioneer. We're going to turn the deserted, the desolate land of Israel that has been neglected for 2,000 years into a first world as it has. Everyone has benefited from Israel's existence and its innovations and inventions and will continue to do so. Just let us enjoy secure borders so it can protect its 9 million citizens, including 2 million Arabs that live peacefully in Israel. Let's pray and we hope that happens speedily in our days. God bless you. God loves you.